How does a political giant become a ghost overnight? You watch Adam Schiff. Inside the cold marble walls of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the man who had haunted a presidency for 4 years was about to learn that the ghosts of his own words had come for him. Kash Patel knew it. He had spent months gathering them, preparing their testimony. The FBI director was not there for a hearing. He was there to conduct an exorcism. Schiff moved through the antechamber like a monarch reviewing his troops. The television lights warmed his face as he offered a practiced smile to the rows of progressive activists, their faces upturned in adoration. They clutched signs that read, "Guardian of the Republic," their T-shirts emblazoned with his silhouette. To them, this was not a hearing. It was the final battle in a holy war, and Schiff was their crusader king. He settled into his leather chair, the weight of the institution beneath him, and meticulously arranged a stack of pristine white papers. It was a piece of theater he had perfected over hundreds of hours of cable news appearances, the image of diligent, sober authority. Across the room, Kash Patel sat in stark contrast. He was alone, a single, unassuming folder resting on the table before him. He observed the scene with an unnerving stillness, his posture relaxed, his hands resting calmly in his lap. A photographer's lens caught a fleeting, almost imperceptible smile on Patel's lips, a silent acknowledgement of the drama about to unfold. When the chairman's gavel fell, Schiff leaned into the microphone, his voice resonating with the deep, righteous timbre that had defined a political era. "Director Patel," he began, the name dripping with disdain. "You are a stain on the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a saboteur masquerading as a public servant. You are not a guardian of the law. You are a political arsonist, sent here by a disgraced president to burn down the very foundations of our justice system." The room, packed with his supporters, erupted into a roar of approval. Schiff paused, letting the wave of applause wash over him, a conductor soaking in his ovation. The cameras tightened on his face, capturing the mask of solemn duty. "Your career," Schiff thundered, his voice rising in a familiar crescendo, "is a monument to dishonesty. You authored fraudulent memos. You attacked decorated patriots. You peddled Kremlin talking points to protect a corrupt president from the consequences of his treason. You sought to dismantle an investigation that was shielding this nation from a hostile foreign power." Patel remained motionless, his gaze fixed on Schiff. He made a small note on a pad, the scratch of his pen the only sound from his side of the room. The director's composure seemed to fuel Schiff's fury. He leaned forward, his knuckles white on the desk. "Have you no answer for your treachery? No defense for your plot to gut the FBI? No explanation for your bizarre plan to exile its headquarters from the Capitol? No remorse for your crusade against the brave men and women who dared to investigate Donald Trump's crimes?" The senator's face was a mask of crimson outrage, his performance reaching its peak. The audience waited, breathless, for Patel to shatter under the weight of the assault. Instead, Patel took a slow, deliberate sip of water. He adjusted his tie, then looked directly at Schiff, his voice calm and measured, yet carrying an edge of cold steel that cut through the chamber's heated atmosphere. "Senator Schiff, your performance is as passionate as ever, theatrical, compelling. It is, however, markedly different from the assessment you gave of me in the spring of 2019. A flicker of confusion crossed Schiff's face. "What are you talking about?" Patel's faint smile returned. "March 28, 2019. A private dinner with tech donors in Palo Alto. You were asked about my role in the Russia investigation. Your words, and I have them precisely, were, 'The issue with Kash Patel isn't that he's a hack. It's that he's dangerously competent. He knows exactly which threads to pull to unravel the narratives we've built. Shall I have the audio played for the committee?" The chamber fell into a stunned silence. The activists in the gallery exchanged confused glances. Schiff's face, moments before flushed with power, was now drained of all color. That's a distortion," he stammered, his voice suddenly thin. "Is it?" Patel countered smoothly. He slid his phone onto the table. "Because the recording is quite clear. It includes the part where you explain, and again I quote, that I have an unfortunate talent for reading intelligence reports without political bias, and that my ability to connect the dots we work so hard to keep separate makes me a significant threat. Smash that like button and subscribe, because we are just getting started." Schiff's jaw worked, but no sound emerged. Behind him, an aide was typing furiously, her face a picture of panic. "I'll interpret your silence as a pass for now," Patel said, retrieving his phone. "But rest assured, Senator, we will explore the vast difference between your public pronouncements and your private truths." He reached for the folder, tapping its cover. The camera zoomed in and the label was visible for a split second. It read, "Schiff, the architect." "Now," Patel continued, his voice still disarmingly conversational, "let's discuss your own architectural work. While you've been delivering sermons on the sanctity of democracy, some of your former disciples have been giving confessionals to the FBI about your methods of construction." Schiff gripped the arms of his chair, the manufactured outrage replaced by a raw, primal fear. The hunter was realizing the trap was not for the hunted, but for him. "What is that supposed to mean?" he demanded. "Oh, I'm not speaking in hypotheticals, Senator," Patel replied, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "I am about to present facts. Sworn affidavits, encrypted communications, financial records, the very kind of hard evidence you promised the world you had on Russian collusion, but which remained mysteriously absent. The difference, Senator, is that my evidence is real." The entire room held its breath as Patel opened the folder. The first page was a document with the header, "Testimony of Senior Staffer, House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence." Subject, "Coordinated Media Disinformation Campaign, directed by Reper Adam Schiff." "Shall we proceed?" Patel asked, his tone laced with a chilling politeness. The man whose testimony was about to fill the screens was not a political rival. He was a protégé, a young lawyer who had once viewed Adam Schiff as a mentor, a man who had dedicated the first decade of his career to the democratic cause before his own conscience staged a rebellion. Patel connected a small encrypted drive to the room's main display, the click of the port echoing in the cavernous silence. Schiff watched him with the frozen stillness of a man seeing his own ghost, his earlier theatrical bravado now a distant memory. The activists in the gallery, once so boisterous, were now hushed, a creeping unease silencing their righteous certainty. "Before we hear from this individual," Patel stated, his voice commanding the room's absolute attention, "I want to be perfectly clear. The witness you are about to see is not a Republican. He is not a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. He is a man who believed in Senator Schiff's mission so deeply that he was willing to help build the machine until he saw what it was designed to destroy." Patel pressed a key, and a face materialized on the monitors. The image was pixelated, the features blurred to protect his identity, but the raw anguish in his eyes was unmistakable. "We will call him Daniel," Patel announced. For 10 years, Daniel served as senior counsel for the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee. He was, by every measure, a key operator, a trusted insider, until the evening of February 12, 2018. On the screen, an FBI timestamp appeared. Interview date, May 5, 2018. The witness's voice, electronically altered but thick with emotion, began to fill the chamber. "I have to report what was said," the voice began, trembling slightly. "I can't live with it. What he's doing, what we were told to do, it's not just a violation of the rules. It's a perversion of everything we're supposed to stand for. It's a betrayal." Schiff sat rigid, a statue of ice. Behind him, His chief of staff whispered frantically into her phone, but he seemed not to hear. His gaze locked on the blurred face of his former confidant. The whistleblower's testimony continued, each word a hammer blow. On February 12th, Congressman Schiff convened a meeting in a secure room, a CF. It was just senior staff. He said the media narrative around the Nunes memo was starting to fade, and that we needed a new offensive. He said, "The truth is losing momentum. We need to create our own." Patel paused the video, letting the words hang in the air. "Remember the context," he interjected, addressing the committee. This was a critical juncture. Public opinion was beginning to question the origins of the Russia probe. And according to this witness, Congressman Schiff decided that if the facts were not on his side, he would simply manufacture new ones. He resumed the recording. Daniel's voice grew stronger, fueled by a desperate need for catharsis. Schiff looked at us and said, "We have access to the raw intelligence. The public doesn't. We can frame it, interpret it, and leak our interpretation as fact. We will become the source." Then he laid out the plan. He called it narrative inoculation. He said, "We will leak a series of stories that preemptively discredit any findings from the Justice Department's Inspector General. We will paint the investigators as partisan hacks before their report is ever released." A wave of gasps swept through the hearing room. Several prominent Democratic senators who had been nodding along with Schiff's opening tirade now stared at him with expressions of dawning horror. The Republican side of the aisle was a sea of grimly focused faces. "I couldn't process it," the whistleblower confessed, his voice cracking. I put my hand up. I said, "Congressman, that's a conspiracy to obstruct justice. We would be using classified information to smear federal investigators." I asked him how that was any different from what we were accusing the other side of doing. The video showed the witness take a long, shuddering breath. He smiled. Adam Schiff smiled at me and said, "It's different because we're the good guys. History won't care about the methods if the outcome is right. We are protecting the country from a tyrant, and that makes our actions necessary. It makes them noble." Schiff shot to his feet, his voice a ragged shout. "This is a lie, a fabrication. This witness is a fiction." "Sit down, Senator," the chairman commanded, his voice sharp and impatient. "You will have your opportunity to respond. The director will continue." Patel gave a slight nod of acknowledgement before advancing to the next piece of evidence. Ordinarily, this would be one man's word against another's. A classic he said. But Daniel was not only troubled, he was meticulous. He knew he was witnessing a criminal conspiracy being born. So, for the subsequent planning sessions, he took notes. Encrypted, time-stamped notes. A new file appeared on the screen. A text document. It was a transcription of a follow-up meeting. This time, it was Schiff's own words, captured verbatim by his once loyal counsel. The text read, "The targets are the reporters at the Times, the Post, and CNN. We give each of them a different piece of the puzzle, a different angle, nothing that can be traced back to a single source. We tell them it comes from multiple sources deep inside the intelligence community. They won't question it. Their hunger for the narrative is too strong." Another voice, identified as a different staffer, chimed in. "But what if the IG's office pushes back, sir? What if they call us out?" Schiff's response was swift and cold. "Then we leak that the IG himself is under investigation. We turn the guns on them. In this town, the accusation is the conviction. The media will run with it. There are no rules in a holy war. You are either a soldier or you are a casualty. Choose." Patel let the text linger on the screen. A digital indictment. The room was in an uproar. Reporters were typing with a furious intensity, their faces illuminated by the glow of their laptops. Several Democratic senators were now huddled together, their expressions a mixture of anger and panic. "That's selectively edited. It's taken out of context," Schiff yelled, his voice cracking under the strain. Actually, Senator, Patel replied, his tone unwavering, we have Daniel's complete digital diary from that period, all 78 pages of it. Would you like me to submit it into the official record? The entry where you discuss creating a media echo chamber? The part where you joke about which journalists are the most gullible? The section where you literally say, we don't need a smoking gun if we can create the illusion of a mushroom cloud? Schiff sank back into his chair, defeated. Behind him, his chief of staff buried her face in her hands. But there's more, Patel announced, his voice cutting through the din. You see, Daniel wasn't alone. His crisis of conscience became contagious. He found others in your office who were horrified by what you were doing. A small resistance, right under your nose. And they have all given sworn testimony to the FBI. He clicked to another video file. A new blurred face, a new altered voice, filled with the same mixture of fear and resolve. I was tasked with feeding information to MSNBC, the second whistleblower began. Schiff gave me specific talking points, cherry-picked phrases from classified reports, and told me to frame them as proof of a cover-up. He said, the goal isn't to inform. The goal is to enrage. Another click. A third witness. I saw him give a folder of documents to Eric Swalwell. He told him, get this to CNN. We need to dominate the Sunday shows. The narrative for the week is set on Sunday. The pattern was methodical, undeniable. Witness after witness. All Democrats, all former loyalists, painting a devastating picture of a systematic campaign to weaponize intelligence and deceive the public. These are phantoms, Schiff protested, his voice barely a whisper. These people are not real. Patel reached into his folder and produced a document. They are very real, Senator. And several have agreed to testify before this committee, in person and under oath, without anonymity. In fact, he glanced at the door of the hearing room, the first one is scheduled to walk through that door in about 10 minutes. The last vestiges of color drained from Schiff's face. He turned and stared at his lawyer, his eyes wide with terror. Now, Senator, let's talk about the foundation of your fame, Patel began, his voice taking on a new, sharper edge as he pulled up a different presentation on the screens. For 4 years, you were the high priest of the collusion narrative. You stood before the American people and swore you had seen the Holy Grail, direct, irrefutable evidence of a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. You didn't suggest it. You declared it as gospel. The monitors around the chamber came to life, a dizzying montage of Schiff's face, repeated across dozens of news clips. His voice, confident and authoritative, echoed from every screen. I can tell you that the case is more than that, and I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence. I think the evidence is compelling and direct. There is significant evidence of collusion. The evidence in the public domain is already overwhelming. The clips played for a full 60 seconds, a relentless symphony of accusation. When the montage concluded, the chamber was left in a ringing silence. Patel allowed the quiet to stretch, letting the weight of the repeated claims settle over the room. Powerful words, Senator, he said, his tone deceptively mild. Declarations that launched 1,000 investigations, that fueled a political firestorm for years, that tore at the very fabric of public trust. There is, however, a rather significant problem. He clicked a button, and the screen split into 2 columns under the heading, Public Statements versus Private Testimony. On the left, Patel explained, gesturing to the screen, we have what you told the American people on television. On the right, we have what you said under oath in closed-door, classified hearings before the House Intelligence Committee. The transcripts you fought for years to keep hidden. Let's compare, shall we? The first pairing appeared. In the left column, under Public Statement, MSNBC, March 2017, were Schiff's words, we have seen clear evidence of collusion and conspiracy. In the right column, under Private Testimony, HPSCI hearing, March 2017, a different story emerged. To be clear, we have not established a direct link or evidence of a coordinated conspiracy at this time. A low murmur spread through the room. Patel advanced to the next slide without comment. Public statement. CNN, May 2018. The evidence of coordination is hiding in plain sight. Private testimony. Classified deposition, May 2018. The committee has not received testimony or documents that would constitute a prosecutable case of criminal conspiracy. With each slide, the contradiction grew more stark, more damning. Public statement. House floor, July 2019. Any patriot who has seen the intelligence I have seen knows Donald Trump is a Russian asset. Private testimony. Closed-door briefing, July 2019. The intelligence community has not concluded that the president is acting as a witting agent of a foreign power. Schiff began to shrink in his seat, the image of the powerful inquisitor dissolving into that of a cornered fraud. The Democratic senators who had built their own political platforms on his claims now looked at him with expressions of cold fury. They had been his foot soldiers, and he had sent them into battle with a lie. But your deception was not merely one of omission, Senator, Patel continued, his voice hardening. It was one of active, deliberate suppression. You didn't just lie about the evidence you claimed to have. You buried the evidence that proved your narrative was false. A new document flashed onto the screen. An email from Schiff to his senior staff, dated December 2017. This is an interesting exhibit, Patel noted. You wrote, and I quote, "The testimony from the Fusion GPS founders is a disaster. They concede under oath that the Steele dossier is unverified and based on rumor. We must classify this transcript and block its release. Its public disclosure would be catastrophic to the narrative." Tell me, Senator, is that what you call protecting democracy? Schiff's lawyer shot to his feet. That communication is protected by committee privilege, not when it demonstrates a clear intent to conceal exculpatory evidence from the American people and from other congressional bodies, Patel retorted coolly. It ceases to be privileged and becomes evidence of a cover-up. But let's move on. He brought up another document. This is a transcript from an interview the Mueller team conducted with one of your top aides. Even Robert Mueller's own investigators, who were hardly friends of the administration, were alarmed by your behavior. They noted, and I quote, that Congressman Schiff had a persistent tendency to embellish and misrepresent the underlying intelligence in his public characterizations of it. The camera zoomed in on Schiff's face. It was ashen. The man who had positioned himself as the ultimate truth-teller was being exposed, layer by layer, as the ultimate liar. But perhaps most damning of all, Senator, is what you did when you learned that a real investigation, the Durham probe, was getting close to the truth. We have your communications. Would you care to hear the email you sent to the editorial board of the Washington Post? Schiff's lawyer frantically shook his head, but Schiff himself seemed paralyzed, unable to speak. It was declassified this morning, specifically for this hearing, Patel said, preempting any objection. He read from the screen. The Durham investigation is becoming a serious threat to our media partners and our overall strategy. We need to get out in front of it. I propose an op-ed that frames the investigation itself as the real scandal, a politically motivated abuse of power. I can provide the key talking points and suggest friendly sources. The revelation landed like a bombshell. It was no longer just about lying, it was about conspiring to use the media to obstruct a federal investigation. But this, Patel said, his voice dropping as he displayed one final document, is the Rosetta Stone of your entire operation. A private memorandum, written by you, for you, found on a private server you thought was secure. It's dated January 10, 2017. Before Donald Trump was even inaugurated, he read the words slowly, letting each one sink in. The Russia narrative is the only viable path forward. It offers the best opportunity to paralyze the incoming administration and delegitimize the presidency. The truth of the underlying claims is irrelevant. The goal is to create a cloud of suspicion that is so thick the public will assume there is a fire. The media will be our most crucial ally. Their desire for this story to be true will override their journalistic skepticism. Through constant repetition, we will make it true. The hearing room exploded into chaos. The chairman's gavel was useless against the roar of outrage. In the gallery, Schiff's own supporters were ripping off their T-shirts, their faces a mixture of confusion and betrayal. That's not mine," Schiff stammered, his voice lost in the noise. "Your own words, Senator. On your own device. Verified by 3 separate digital forensic teams." Patel's voice cut through the pandemonium, relentless and precise. "You knew, from the very beginning. You knew it was a lie. You knew the dossier was a political fabrication. You knew the FISA warrants were based on that fabrication. And yet, you went on television over 400 times and lied to the world." He paused, his eyes locking onto Schiff's. "But you did more than just lie, didn't you? You perverted our sacred institutions. You turned the awesome power of the intelligence community into your personal political weapon. You committed the very sin you accused your enemies of, only you did it with a self-righteous smile. You are the disease you claim to be curing." "This is political revenge!" Schiff shrieked, a final desperate cry. "Is it?" Patel countered. "Then perhaps you can explain this." He displayed one last image, a text message from Schiff to then FBI Director James Comey, dated February 2017. "Jim, the Russia probe needs to stay in the headlines. I don't care what the evidence shows or doesn't show. The process is the punishment. Keep it going." The room fell silent once more. The text was a smoking gun, a clear, undeniable directive to weaponize an investigation for political ends. "The real tragedy, Senator," Patel said, leaning back, "is that your crusade had real-world consequences. President Trump was attempting to find common ground with Russia to fight ISIS. A worthy goal. But your manufactured hysteria made any form of cooperation politically impossible. You fanned the flames of a new Cold War, all for your own political gain. How many lives were lost because of your lies? That is a question you will have to answer to your conscience, assuming you have one left." Schiff had no answer. His career, built on a mountain of lies, was collapsing into a sinkhole of truth, and Kash Patel was standing right there, ready to push him in. Patel allowed the echoes of the last revelation to fade, giving the committee and the audience a moment to absorb the sheer scale of the deception. Schiff sat motionless, a man hollowed out, the architect of a grand illusion now buried under its rubble. Patel then opened a new folder, this one thinner, more clinical. The label simply read, "Censure, H. Resin 521. Schiff flinched, the sight of the resolution number a fresh sting. "Senator Schiff," Patel began, his tone shifting from prosecutorial to that of a historian documenting a fall from grace. "On June 21, 2023, you received a distinction of profound dishonor. You became one of only 26 members in the entire history of the United States Congress to be formally censured by your peers. You joined a very exclusive club, populated by individuals condemned for bribery, for treason, for physical assault on the House floor. Your crime, however, was arguably more insidious. A sustained, deliberate campaign of lies against the American people and the institution you swore to serve." He produced the official House resolution, its text appearing on the monitors. "The final vote was 213 to 209, Patel continued. "But the real story isn't the margin. It's the composition. It takes a lot to get members of Congress to formally condemn one of their own. When members of your own party break ranks to do it, it signals a crisis of integrity that transcends politics. A list of names appeared on the screen, highlighted in blue. They were the Democrats who had voted in favor of the censure. 20 of your colleagues, Senator. 20 Democrats who stood on the House floor and declared that your conduct was indefensible. These weren't your political enemies. These were your allies, your seatmates, people who had served with you on committees for years. Do you recall the words of Congressman Golden, a man you once mentored? He stood before the House and said, "I can no longer, in good conscience, defend a colleague who has so flagrantly and repeatedly abused the trust of this body and the nation. The lies must stop." He called your actions a cancer on our caucus. Patel then brought up another document, an internal memo that sent a fresh shockwave through the room. But the censure vote wasn't a surprise, was it? It was the culmination of years of private warnings from your own leadership. This is a memorandum from then-Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, dated early 2019. He read from the document, "Adams' public statements on the Russia investigation are becoming a significant liability. He is making promises of evidence that the intelligence does not support. He needs to be counseled to lower the temperature before he inflicts irreparable damage on the committee's credibility and our party's message." She saw it coming, Senator. Your own leadership tried to warn you, but your hubris was too great. "That's a privileged internal communication," Schiff's lawyer protested, his voice weak. "It was," Patel corrected, "until it became part of a pattern of conduct that led to a formal House sanction. At that point, it becomes evidence of your state of mind, proving you were repeatedly warned that your actions were reckless and dishonest. You chose to ignore those warnings." He transitioned to an even more sensitive topic. The concerns were not just political. They were personal, and they came from within your own community. An email chain appeared on the screen, the subject line reading, "Concerns regarding Adams' rhetoric." "This," Patel said, his voice dropping slightly, "is an exchange between several prominent Jewish Democratic members of Congress from 2021. They were deeply disturbed by your conduct. Would you like me to read what your colleagues, who share your heritage, said about you?" Schiff stared blankly, his silence a concession. Patel read from the email. "Adams' habit of accusing his opponents of disloyalty, using language that echoes historical anti-Semitic tropes, is deeply troubling. He then uses his own Jewish identity as a shield to deflect any criticism. It is a cynical and dangerous weaponization of our shared history for his own political protection. It demeans our collective experience and must be addressed." They discussed a formal condemnation, Senator. Your own colleagues. They were horrified that you were using your identity as both a sword and a shield. "But let's return to the censure itself," Patel said, steering back to the main point. "It wasn't just one lie. It was the sheer volume, the relentless, systemic nature of the deceit." A new graphic filled the screens, a timeline stretching from 2017 to 2023. It was a kaleidoscope of falsehoods, color-coded by category. Red for Russia collusion, blue for FISA abuse, green for whistleblower contacts, yellow for classified leaks. The screen was a chaotic tapestry of documented lies. 412 documented false or misleading public statements, Patel narrated, the statistics appearing in large, bold numbers. 181 misrepresentations of classified intelligence. 94 false denials about his office's contacts with the so-called whistleblower. And these are merely the instances that have been definitively proven. The Ethics Committee, in its preliminary report, called it a pattern of calculated deception without precedent in the modern history of the House of Representatives. He held up a thick, spiral-bound report. This is that preliminary report, 280 pages of it. It details how you established what your own staff called a disinformation architecture, a system for creating, testing, and disseminating false narratives through willing partners in the media. But this, Patel said, his voice turning cold as he held up a single sheet of paper, is what truly sealed your fate with your colleagues. This is a text message you sent to your chief of staff on the morning of the censure vote. He read the message aloud. If this vote goes through, I will make sure every Democrat who votes against me pays. I have a file on every one of them. They will regret this. Gasps filled the chamber. This was not just politics. It was blackmail. You threatened them, Senator, Patel stated flatly. You tried to use fear to hold your caucus in line, and it backfired spectacularly. That text was leaked almost immediately. We spoke to 3 Democratic members who were on the fence. They told our investigators that your threat was so disgusting, so thuggish, that it made their decision for them. They voted to censure you not just for your lies, but for your character. Patel then played a video clip from the House floor on the day of the vote. It showed the moment the final tally was announced. The camera focused on Schiff, who could be seen turning to approach a group of his Democratic colleagues, his face a mask of fury. The video showed them, one by one, physically turning their backs on him, refusing to even look at him. The censure was just the beginning of the end, Patel continued. The House Ethics Committee immediately launched a formal, full-scale investigation. Would you care to know some of their preliminary findings? Schiff's lawyer again rose to object, but Patel cut him off. Actually, I can discuss it. Because Senator Schiff waived his right to confidentiality when he appeared on national television last month, called the investigation a partisan sham, and declared that it would find absolutely nothing. So, let's take a look at nothing. A list appeared on the screen. Undeclared gifts from foreign lobbyists. Campaign funds used for lavish personal expenses, including private jet travel and luxury hotel stays. A pattern of financial transactions with individuals later identified as foreign intelligence assets. And that's just the financial investigation. The probe into your abuse of the security clearance process is even more damning. This is a smear, Schiff finally croaked, his voice hoarse. No, Senator, Patel replied with chilling calm. A smear is when you spend years accusing a man of being a Russian agent without a shred of evidence. This is called accountability, a concept you've championed for others, but never applied to yourself. He pulled one last document from the folder. Oh, and this arrived this morning. A letter from the leadership of the California Democratic Party. They are holding an emergency vote this afternoon to formally request your resignation from the Senate. Your own party, in your own state, is preparing to disown you. He closed the folder. The truth is, Senator, your censure was not a political act. It was an institutional act of self-preservation. It was the sound of an entire institution, including your own allies, saying that some lines cannot be crossed. You didn't just cross them, you erased them, and now you are paying the price. As the segment concluded, Schiff sat alone, a man excommunicated by his own church, his legacy not of a crusader, but of a heretic. And the worst was yet to come. Now, Patel said, his voice dropping to a grave and serious tone as he opened a new, heavily marked folder. The classification stamps stood out in stark red ink. Top Secret, SC No Forn. The operation's code name was visible. Operation Rolling Stone. We now arrive at the engine room of your entire enterprise, Senator. The systematic, criminal dissemination of this nation's most sensitive secrets for political advantage. Operation Rolling Stone was the FBI's code name for the investigation into a series of devastating leaks of classified intelligence. It wasn't just an investigation. It was a post-mortem on how the trust placed in the House Intelligence Committee was corrupted and turned into a weapon against the American people. A complex diagram materialized on the screens, a web of connections so dense it resembled a neural network. At its very center was a single node, Schiff. From that center, hundreds of lines radiated outwards, connecting to names of staffers, journalists, political operatives, and specific dates of news articles. This gentleman is the architecture of a conspiracy, Patel explained, using a laser pointer to trace some of the connections. The result of a 2-year, multi-agency investigation. Every line represents a confirmed illegal communication. Every node, a co-conspirator. This wasn't just a few careless whispers to the press, Senator. You were the spy master of a sophisticated intelligence operation targeting your own government. The diagram zoomed in on a cluster of nodes immediately surrounding Schiff. Let's begin with your primary cutout, Congressman Eric Swalwell, your loyal apprentice on the Intelligence Committee. The very same congressman who was notoriously compromised by a Chinese intelligence operative, yet you fought tooth and nail to keep him on the committee. Now we understand the reason for your loyalty. He wasn't just a colleague, he was your chief courier. A series of documents appeared beside the diagram. Transcripts of encrypted text messages between Schiff and Swalwell. Schiff, Eric, the package on Manafort is ready. Deliver to the usual contact at CNN. Swalwell. On it. ETA 30 minutes. He knows to expect it for the evening broadcast. Schiff. Good. Emphasize the unverified Russian links. That's the hook. Swalwell. Understood. I'll also give a heads up to Rachel's producer. These are not vague allegations, Patel stated, his voice cold. For each of these messages, we have compiled a corresponding timeline. A message is sent, and within hours, the exact classified details discussed appear on national television, often quoted verbatim, attributed to sources familiar with the matter. Information that could only have originated from one place, the Intelligence Committee. He advanced the presentation. But you didn't rely solely on Mr. Swalwell. You cultivated your own network of media assets. And I choose the word assets with precision, because when a journalist knowingly agrees to receive and publish classified information as part of a political campaign, they cease to be a journalist. They become an accomplice. A new chart appeared, this one detailing connections to prominent figures in the media. Let's take Adam Goldman at the New York Times. Our investigation confirmed 32 separate instances of you providing him with classified information between 2017 and 2020. We have the encrypted signal messages, the burner phone records, even surveillance logs of your discreet meetings in out-of-the-way coffee shops. He displayed a transcript of one such recorded conversation. It was damning. Schiff, Adam, this next one is highly classified, code word level. It relates to sources and methods in our surveillance of Russian oligarchs. You have to source this very carefully. Attribute it to senior intelligence officials briefed on the matter. Goldman's response was clearly audible. Don't worry, Adam. This isn't my first rodeo. I know how to protect you. The reporters in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, some exchanging nervous glances. The line between source and subject was blurring before their very eyes. But your leaks weren't just offensive, they were defensive, Patel continued, his narrative building momentum. You used them as a shield to protect your own conspiracy. Let's examine the case of the FISA abuse investigation. A timeline appeared on the monitors, laying out a sequence of events. September 2018. The Department of Justice Inspector General quietly informs the committee leadership that it has opened an investigation into potential abuses in the FISA warrant process related to Carter Page. September the 12th. You are briefed on this investigation. September 13th. Phone records show you place calls to 3 specific journalists. September 14th. Coordinated stories appear in The Washington Post, The New York Times, and on MSNBC, all claiming that the Inspector General's investigation is a politically motivated witch hunt designed to undermine the Russia probe. You used classified knowledge of a legitimate investigation to launch a preemptive media strike against it. But it gets worse, Patel said, his voice hardening. He held up a new document. This is a sworn affidavit from a journalist who finally came forward, riddled with guilt. She provided us with this text exchange from you. The texts were displayed for all to see. and a collective gasp went through the room. Schiff, I need a story out by tomorrow morning that Devin Nunes is compromised by Russian intelligence. Reporter, Adam, that's a huge claim. I have nothing to base that on. I can't just print that. Schiff, you don't need evidence. Just cite sources on the Intelligence Committee. I will make it worth your while. I have that other classified story you wanted. Reporter, okay, but you owe me big time. You were bartering state secrets, Senator, Patel declared, his voice ringing with indignation. Trading classified intelligence for political hit pieces. That is the very definition of corruption. Patel then brought up a financial slide that made the room go cold. And speaking of being paid, let's follow the money. Our Financial Crimes Unit spent a year unraveling a complex web of payments. These are wire transfers from political action committees and dark money groups affiliated with you, laundered through shell corporations, and paid out as consulting fees to several of the journalists who were the primary outlets for your leaks. $10,000 here, $25,000 there, always structured to avoid scrutiny. Always flowing to the very reporters who happened to have exclusive intelligence that perfectly matched your political narrative. That's preposterous, Schiff managed to say, finding his voice. Is it? Patel countered, immediately displaying a set of bank records. This is your brother-in-law's consulting firm. Here are the payments from the payees, and here are the subsequent payments to individuals who just happen to be national security reporters. It's all here, Senator. A clear, documented trail of money for propaganda. A new slide showed the grand total, $3.2 million in payments to 17 media-affiliated individuals and their related entities between 2017 and 2021. But this, Patel said, his voice dropping as if delivering a final, fatal blow, is the nail in the coffin. We didn't just have records. We had a confession. From the heart of your network. He played a video. The face was instantly recognizable to everyone in Washington. A celebrated Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from the Washington Post, sitting in a sterile FBI interview room. I have been granted full immunity in exchange for my truthful and complete cooperation, the journalist said, her voice steady, but her eyes filled with shame. Yes, Congressman Adam Schiff was my primary source for classified information for over 3 years. Yes, I was aware the information was classified. Yes, on several occasions, I received payments through third-party entities at his direction. I am here to provide the Bureau with all of my notes, emails, text messages, and recordings. The hearing room descended into absolute pandemonium. This was an earthquake that would shatter the foundations of the Washington Press Corps. She provided everything, Patel said over the noise, his voice cutting through the chaos like a razor. Every name in your media syndicate, every planted story, every fabricated narrative, your entire propaganda machine, Senator, has been laid bare by the person you trusted most. He held up one last document from the Operation Rolling Stone folder. This is the official damage assessment from the Director of National Intelligence. It concludes that your leaks led to the direct compromise of at least 5 major intelligence-gathering operations. Sources were compromised. Methods were exposed. Allied nations ceased sharing critical intelligence with us for fear that it would appear on CNN the next day. The damage you have inflicted on our national security is, and I quote, staggering and irreparable. The real victims, however, Patel concluded, his eyes burning with cold fury, were the American people. You poisoned the well of information. You turned the free press, a pillar of our democracy, into your personal pravda. You created a funhouse mirror and told the country it was a window to the truth. He gestured to the spiderweb diagram still glowing on the screen. This is your legacy, Senator, a monument to corruption. Every individual on this chart has been identified and is now under federal investigation. Criminal referrals have been made for 41 individuals, including 17 members of the media, who chose to be conspirators instead of journalists. Schiff had shrunk into his chair, a ghostly figure drained of life. His hands were trembling uncontrollably. "Oh, and Mr. Swalwell?" Patel added, as a final thought. "He began cooperating with our investigation the moment we presented him with the wiretap evidence. It seems the prospect of a long federal prison sentence has a remarkable way of focusing the mind. Your lieutenant, senator, is now the government's star witness against you." The chapter closed on the image of the exposed network, a testament to a conspiracy of breathtaking arrogance, with Schiff at its center, no longer the master manipulator, but the prime target of a sprawling criminal investigation. The atmosphere in the hearing room had transformed. It was no longer a political forum. It had become a courtroom, and Kash Patel was reading the indictment. The air was thick with the grim finality of a verdict already rendered. Schiff's supporters had long since fled the gallery, replaced by the cold, hard reality of his own making. "Let me be very clear, Senator, about the legal precipice you now stand on," Patel said, his tone shifting to that of a prosecutor detailing the full weight of the law. He opened a new folder, this one bound in the stark blue of the Department of Justice. "We have documented, to a criminal standard, more than 50 separate instances of you unlawfully disclosing classified information. However, for the purposes of prosecution, the Department of Justice has chosen to proceed with the 9 most egregious counts, the ones that inflicted the most catastrophic damage on the national security of the United States." He pulled out a document with the imposing header, "Criminal Referral, United States of America versus Adam Bennett Schiff." "Count 1, Patel began, reading in a slow, deliberate cadence. "Violation of 18 U.S. Code, paragraph 798, unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Specifically, the disclosure of National Security Agency intercepts related to Allied military operations. This leak, which you funneled to the press in April 2017, forced a friendly nation to suspend a critical counterterrorism partnership with us for over a year. Maximum sentence, 10 years in federal prison." He continued, each count a nail in Schiff's legal coffin. "Count 2, unauthorized disclosure of CIA human asset information. Your leak to the New York Times in July 2017, detailing the role of a CIA source within a hostile government, led directly to that asset's capture and execution. Their blood is on your hands, Senator. Maximum sentence, 20 years. Count 3, disclosure of FISA-derived intelligence. You didn't just leak that a warrant existed. You leaked the specific technical methods used to gather the intelligence, rendering a billion-dollar surveillance program useless overnight. Maximum sentence, 10 years. Patel methodically went through all 9 counts, detailing leaks that compromised nuclear intelligence, satellite reconnaissance capabilities, and the identities of undercover FBI agents. The cumulative total was staggering. By my math, Senator, on these 9 counts under the Espionage Act and related statutes alone, you are facing a potential sentence of 140 years. But that, Patel continued, is merely for the leaks themselves. The indictment goes further." He pulled out another sheaf of papers. "There is also conspiracy to defraud the United States for your organized effort to use the powers of your office to spread disinformation and obstruct official proceedings. There is wire fraud for the scheme to funnel money to journalists in exchange for favorable coverage. There are 3 counts of lying to federal investigators based on your sworn testimony to the Inspector General. There is obstruction of justice for your attempt to intimidate witnesses and discredit the Durham investigation. And finally, there is abuse of office, a charge reserved for the most profound betrayals of public trust. The grand total, Senator, if convicted on all charges, exceeds 200 years. As if orchestrated by a master dramatist, a sudden symphony of buzzing phones erupted throughout the chamber. Reporters, aides, and even senators looked down at their devices in unison. Patel paused, a faint, knowing smile touching his lips. "Ah," he said, "it appears the Department of Justice has just unsealed the indictment. It is now public record. Senator Schiff, you are no longer just a subject of investigation. As of this moment, you are a formally indicted federal defendant on 27 criminal counts." Schiff's lawyer leaped from his chair. "This is a procedural monstrosity, a political prosecution of the highest order. You cannot announce an indictment in a congressional hearing." "I am not announcing it, counsel," Patel corrected him calmly. "I am merely commenting on a publicly available document. And you are correct. Your client will have his day in court. Many days, from what I understand. The prosecution's evidence file is reportedly over 1 million pages long. Sir, the legal ramifications were only the first wave of the tsunami." Patel glanced at his own phone, which was now lighting up with news alerts. "Oh, this is moving quickly," he noted, reading from the screen. "The California Democratic Party, in an emergency session, has just voted unanimously to demand your immediate resignation. Governor Newsom has scheduled a press conference in 5 minutes to announce the process for a special election to fill your seat." More buzzing, more alerts. And here we have a statement from the Senate Majority Leader. "The Democratic caucus has voted, also unanimously, to strip you of all your committee assignments, effective immediately. You are now a senator in name only, stripped of all power, all influence." "This is a coup!" Schiff shrieked, lurching to his feet, his face a contorted mask of rage and terror. "This is the revenge of the deep state. This is tyranny." "This," Patel said, his voice cutting through Schiff's tirade with icy precision, "is accountability, a concept with which you seem to be fundamentally unfamiliar. But please, continue. I should remind you, as a newly indicted individual, that every word you are screaming can and will be used against you." The main doors of the hearing room swung open, and 2 stone-faced FBI agents entered. They did not approach Schiff, but stood sentinel against the back wall, their presence a silent, powerful symbol of his new reality. He was no longer a powerful senator. He was a man under federal watch. "Let me share some of the reactions from your colleagues," Patel said, scrolling through his device. "Senator Elizabeth Warren. I am appalled and heartbroken. Adam Schiff has betrayed the trust of his colleagues, his constituents, and his country." Senator Bernie Sanders. "The evidence presented is overwhelming and sickening. He must resign today." Even Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has tweeted, "I defended him. I was wrong. This is a betrayal of everything we fight for." The political abandonment was absolute. Patel then gestured for a live video feed to be put on the main screen. It showed the hallway outside Schiff's Senate office. Staffers were streaming out, carrying cardboard boxes filled with their belongings. Some were weeping. His nameplate was already being unscrewed from the wall. "Your financial backers are also running for the exits," Patel added. "Act Blue has just frozen all fundraising activities for your accounts and is exploring how to refund recent donations." The Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee has issued a statement severing all ties and instructing all affiliated groups to do the same. The political empire you built on a foundation of lies is crumbling to dust in a single afternoon. In a last desperate act of defiance, Schiff turned to the chairman. "The Ethics Committee must review this. This is a violation of due process." "Oh, they have reviewed it, Senator," Patel assured him. "They convened an emergency meeting 90 minutes ago. The vote was unanimous. They are recommending your immediate expulsion from the United States Senate. The full Senate is scheduled to vote on the resolution tomorrow morning. Given that your own party is leading the charge for your resignation, I believe the outcome is a foregone conclusion." The final, most personal blow was yet to come. The hearing room doors opened once more, and a woman in her 80s, her face etched with sorrow but her posture resolute, was escorted in by Capitol Police. Schiff's face went white as a sheet. "Mother!" "No. What are you doing here?" "I am sorry, Adam," she said, her voice trembling but clear as she approached the witness table. "I cannot remain silent. You have brought such shame upon our name, upon the values your father and I worked so hard to instill in you. He would be turning in his grave to see what you have become." She turned to face the committee. "My son was a good boy. He believed in justice. But this city, this thirst for power, it poisoned him. He became obsessed with hatred, with destroying his enemies. I tried to talk to him. His family tried, but he would not listen." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse. "His children asked me to read this. They could not bear to face him." Her voice broke as she read the letter. "Dad, we love you, but we can no longer defend what you have done. Please, for the sake of the family, for your own soul, resign. Get help. Try to remember the man you were before Washington consumed you." The letter was the sound of the final pillar breaking. Schiff collapsed into his chair, his body racked with deep, agonizing sobs. His mother turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance. "And there," Patel said, into the profound silence, "is the true cost of corruption. It is not just measured in prison sentences or political ruin. It is measured in a shattered family, a squandered legacy, and a soul lost to the darkness of its own making." He began to pack his folders. "The Bureau will be in contact regarding the logistics of your surrender and arraignment, Senator. My advice would be to hire a very good criminal defense attorney, and, perhaps for the first time in a long time, to consider the merits of telling the truth. It will not save you from prison, but it may be the first step toward saving yourself." The hearing was over. Schiff sat alone, a broken man in the center of his own wreckage. In politics, there are fates far worse than losing an election. There is the abyss of total irrelevance, the cold, silent exile that comes when an entire party, an entire state, and an entire legacy turn their back on you in the space of a single afternoon. The morning after the hearing, Washington, D.C. awoke to a cold, persistent drizzle, the gray sky a perfect mirror of the political establishment's mood. Adam Schiff's public immolation had been so absolute, so devastatingly complete, that even his most ardent political foes spoke in hushed tones. It was the kind of takedown that would be studied for decades, a case study in hubris and consequence. Miles away, in Sacramento, the California sun had not yet risen when the state's Democratic leadership convened an emergency meeting at 6 a.m. Pacific time. The mood was not somber, it was surgical. Every major Democratic figure in the state, from city mayors to congressional representatives, was present either in person or via a secure video link. The agenda was brutally simple: excising the cancer of Adam Schiff. Governor Gavin Newsom, a man known for his polished political rhetoric, dispensed with all pleasantries. "We have a political and moral catastrophe on our hands," he began, his voice sharp and unsparing. "Adam Schiff has become a symbol of the very corruption we claim to fight against. He has humiliated our state, betrayed our party, and handed our opponents a weapon that will be used against us for a generation. The question is not whether he must go. The question is how swiftly and unequivocally we can sever him from the body politic of California." The ensuing vote was a mere formality. The California Democratic Party unanimously passed a resolution formally censuring Schiff and demanding his immediate resignation from the U.S. Senate. They went a step further, taking the unprecedented step of revoking his membership in the state party, effectively excommunicating him from the political movement he had spent his life claiming to champion. Back in Washington, Schiff had not left his Senate office. He couldn't. A phalanx of news crews and protesters camped outside the building made a return to his apartment impossible. He had spent the night on a couch, staring at the ceiling as his phone buzzed incessantly with a torrent of rage, disgust, and demands for his resignation, until he finally powered it down around 3:00 a.m. His email server had crashed under the sheer volume of incoming messages. At 9:00 a.m., driven by some vestige of defiance, he attempted to make his way to the Senate floor for the day's opening session. He was met at the ornate chamber doors by the Senate Sergeant at Arms. "Senator," the officer said, his voice firm but not without a hint of pity, "pursuant to the caucus vote last night, I have been instructed to inform you that your floor privileges have been suspended pending the outcome of the expulsion vote. You are to return to your office and remain there until you are summoned." The humiliation was absolute. A United States senator, physically barred from the very chamber that was the source of his power. He was a ghost, haunting the halls where he once strode like a king. Schiff trudged back to his office suite to find it nearly empty. Desks were cleared. Personal photos were gone. The only person left was his longtime chief of staff, a woman who had been with him for 15 years. She was placing the last of her personal effects into a cardboard box. "Cindy, you too?" he asked, his voice a hollow whisper. "Yes, Adam, I have to," she replied, refusing to make eye contact. "My attorney was very clear. I have to distance myself. We are all targets now. Everyone who worked on your committee, everyone who was in those meetings, we are all facing potential criminal liability because of you." She paused at the door, her hand on the knob, and finally looked at him. Her eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound and weary sadness. "We believed in you, Adam. We thought you were fighting for something noble. We trusted you, and you used that trust to build a criminal enterprise. I truly hope, for your sake, that it was worth it." She closed the door behind her, and for the first time, Adam Schiff was completely and utterly alone. At 10:00 a.m., the Senate convened. The air on the floor was thick with a grim sense of duty. Expelling a member requires a 2/3 majority, a constitutional high bar cleared only 15 times in the nation's history. But as senator after senator rose to speak, it was clear that number 16 was a certainty. The speeches were a brutal cascade of denunciation, made all the more powerful because they came from his own side. Democrats, who just days before had been his allies, now lined up to cast him out. Senator Dick Durbin, the Democratic whip, spoke first. "Adam Schiff has committed the ultimate political sin. He has violated his oath, he has betrayed his constituents, and he has committed federal crimes from the very heart of this institution. He has no honor left, and he has no place in this chamber." Senator Chris Murphy, who had often appeared on television to defend Schiff, looked ashen. "I defended him. I repeated his claims. I believed him. I was wrong. The evidence is irrefutable, and the betrayal is absolute. He must be expelled." Even Senator Elizabeth Warren, known for her fierce partisan fire, spoke with a quiet, sorrowful gravity. "This is not about politics. This is about the fundamental integrity of the United States Senate. Adam Schiff has demonstrated that he has none. To protect the honor of this body, we must act." The final vote was a historic rebuke, 94-0. 6 senators, all Democrats who were personally close to Schiff, abstained, unable to cast the final stone, but unwilling to stand in his defense. It was the most lopsided expulsion vote in the history of the Senate. Schiff watched the proceedings on a small television in his office. Each yay vote was a hammer blow against his political coffin. When the final tally was announced, the sergeant-at-arms appeared at his door again, this time with a small cart. "Former Senator Schiff," he said, the change in title landing with the force of a physical strike, "I am here to collect your credentials and to escort you from the premises." Schiff silently handed over his Senate ID badge, his lapel pin, his parking pass, the small talismans of a power that had evaporated into thin air. As he was escorted through the marble corridors, congressional aides and staffers turned their heads, averting their gaze as if looking at him might be contagious. Outside the Capitol, a crowd had gathered. Not supporters. Those were long gone. These were hecklers and protesters, their signs reading, "Traitor," "Liar," and far worse. Capitol Police had to form a protective cordon to get Schiff into a waiting, unmarked car as the crowd roared its contempt. The man who had once commanded the applause of the nation now fled its scorn. The final, and perhaps most profound, humiliation did not come from a vote or a news report. It arrived in the suffocating silence of his own apartment that evening. Having been driven from the Capitol in disgrace, with nowhere else to go, Adam Schiff returned to his sterile Washington residence. The doorman, who had greeted him with a deferential, "Good evening, Senator," for years, now simply nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. The apartment felt vast and empty, a cold mausoleum for a dead career. He mechanically turned on the television, not for information, but for noise, a futile attempt to drown out the screaming silence in his own head. He flipped through the channels, his own disgraced face staring back at him from every screen. Then he landed on a live press conference from FBI headquarters. Director Kash Patel stood at the podium, his expression calm and resolute. Today's historic events in the United States Senate are not a cause for celebration, but for sober reflection. Patel began, his voice steady and devoid of triumph. They demonstrate that our system, while imperfect, can work. They prove that no one, regardless of their title or their perceived power, is above the law. The expulsion of a senator and the unsealing of a federal indictment are not the end of a process, but the beginning of a much larger one. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled reporters. This investigation is far from over. The conspiracy of leaks and disinformation was not the work of one man alone. We have identified a significant network of individuals in government, in lobbying, and in the media who participated in these schemes, who abused their positions of trust, and who acted as willing accomplices in a campaign to deceive the American people. The camera tightened on Patel's face. He seemed to be speaking directly to those individuals through the lens. They know who they are, and they know that we are coming. The evidence we have collected is comprehensive and irrefutable. He allowed a slight, almost imperceptible smile to cross his lips. To those individuals, I have a simple message. The truth has a way of coming to light, and in the end, it always wins. Always. As the press conference concluded, Schiff's personal phone, the one he had kept active, buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text message from his son. He fumbled to open it, his hands shaking. The message was short, each word a shard of glass. "Dad, I saw the news about the expulsion. The kids are asking why Grandpa is a traitor. They saw it on the news at a friend's house. I don't know what to tell them. Please don't try to contact us for a while. We need time. I love you, but I don't know who you are anymore." Schiff dropped the phone as if it had burned him. The screen cracked on the marble floor. This was a pain deeper than any political defeat, a wound that no legal strategy could ever heal. He was an outcast, not just from the Senate, but from his own family. The man who had accused others of betraying America was now, in the eyes of his own grandchildren, a bad man. He sat in the darkness of his living room, the glow of the television flickering across his face, a man utterly vanquished. His career was over. His freedom was in peril. His family was estranged. His legacy was a smoking crater of disgrace. Meanwhile, in his sparsely decorated office at the J. Edgar Hoover Building, Kash Patel was not celebrating. He was working. The wall behind his desk was a sprawling collage of photographs, documents, and network diagrams, a detailed roadmap for the work that still lay ahead. The Schiff investigation was just the first phase. His assistant knocked and entered the room. "Director," she said, "the Attorney General is on line 1. He's ready to discuss the next round of indictments." Patel nodded, a look of grim determination on his face as he reached for the phone. Tell him I'm on my way. We have a lot of work to do." As he walked toward the secure communications room, he paused and looked out his window at the distant Capitol dome, glowing under the night sky. "One down," he murmured to himself, "but the swamp is deep and wide. Time to finish what we started." The story had reached its inevitable conclusion, a modern political tragedy. It began with one man's arrogant abuse of power and ended with another's quiet, relentless pursuit of the truth. Adam Schiff had believed himself to be untouchable, a knight in a holy war, protected by his position, his party, and his allies in the press. He had learned, far too late, that in America, the arc of the moral universe may be long, but it eventually bends toward justice. Accountability, he discovered, comes for everyone in the end. The political death was complete, not with the clang of a prison door, but with something far more devastating: the total and absolute rejection by everyone and everything he had ever held dear. He was a man without a party, without a position, without a family, and without a future. And across Washington, in quiet, wood-paneled offices, other powerful figures were looking over their shoulders, deleting old text messages, and wondering, with a cold knot of fear in their stomachs, if they would be next. The answer, as Kash Patel would have told them, was simple: yes, they would be. The fall of Adam Schiff was not a contained explosion. It was a seismic event that sent fractures racing through the entire political and media landscape of Washington. In the days that followed his expulsion, a palpable sense of panic took hold, not just among politicians, but within the hallowed newsrooms of the nation's most prestigious media outlets. The names implicated in Patel's presentation, journalists from the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and MSNBC, were not junior reporters. They were household names, Pulitzer Prize winners, the very titans of the industry who had been presented to the public as unimpeachable arbiters of truth. Now, they were named as potential co-conspirators in a federal criminal investigation. The Washington Post's newsroom was described by an insider as a scene of open warfare. The journalist, who had confessed to the FBI in exchange for immunity, was immediately fired, but her confession had implicated editors and other senior reporters. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Lawyers, not editors, were now directing the coverage. The paper published a terse, front-page statement acknowledging the gravity of the allegations against its staff and announcing an independent external review. It was a stunning admission of institutional failure from a paper whose motto was "Democracy dies in darkness." At CNN, two prominent on-air personalities were abruptly taken off the air, their shows replaced with reruns. The network's official statement cited personal reasons, but the truth was an open secret in Washington. Their names had been featured prominently in the evidence presented by Patel, linked to specific leaks and coordinated narratives. The panic was contagious. Journalists across the city began frantically scrubbing their social media histories, deleting old posts that praised Schiff or echoed his talking points. The once cozy relationship between the press and the Democratic establishment had become toxic overnight. Within the Democratic Party, the fallout was even more brutal. The Schiff affair had exposed a deep rot of cynicism and corruption that went far beyond one man. The 20 Democratic members of the House who had voted to censure him were now hailed as prophets, while those who had defended him to the bitter end were tainted by association. A generational civil war erupted within the party. Younger, more idealistic members demanded a full-scale house cleaning, calling for the resignation of any leader who had been aware of Schiff's activities and failed to stop him. The old guard, desperate to contain the damage, argued for unity and a focus on the future. But their pleas fell on deaf ears. The party's credibility was in tatters. How could they campaign on a platform of ethics and accountability when their own Intelligence Committee chairman had been running a criminal disinformation campaign from the heart of Congress? The special election to fill Schiff's vacant Senate seat in California became a brutal proxy war for the soul of the party. The establishment-backed candidate found her campaign collapsing as she struggled to answer questions about her past support for Schiff. A new wave of outsider candidates emerged, their central message a promise to purge the party of the corruption that Schiff represented. Donors, who had poured millions into the Democratic machine, were now closing their checkbooks, demanding proof of systemic reform before they would reinvest. The party was not just wounded, it was broken, facing an existential crisis of its own making. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice investigation, far from slowing down, was accelerating. The FBI, under Patel's direction, executed a series of quiet, early-morning raids. Search warrants were served at the homes of several prominent lobbyists and political consultants whose names had appeared in the financial records linked to Schiff's media network. Laptops were seized, documents were confiscated, and a clear message was sent. The investigation was moving from the conspirators to the financiers. The fear in Washington was no longer just about political embarrassment or losing a job. It was about the very real prospect of criminal indictment and prison time. The phrase, "Are you on the list?" became a whispered, paranoid question at cocktail parties and in the corridors of power. Patel himself remained a quiet, almost enigmatic figure amidst the chaos he had unleashed. He gave no triumphant interviews. He held no celebratory press conferences. He was simply seen, day after day, entering the J. Edgar Hoover building, his face set with a look of grim purpose. He was dismantling a machine, piece by piece, and he was doing it with the cold, methodical precision of a bomb disposal expert. He was not just prosecuting individuals, he was conducting an institutional cleansing. The swamp, as he had called it, was vast, and he was draining it one corrupt channel at a time. The Schiff affair was not the end of the story. It was the end of the beginning. It was the moment the public finally saw the full extent of the decay, and the moment the architects of that decay realized that their time was up. The old rules were broken, the old alliances were shattered, and a new era of accountability, however painful, had begun. The fear was real because the threat was real. The swamp was fighting back with leaks and anonymous smears against Patel and his investigators, but it was the desperate thrashing of a creature caught in a trap from which there was no escape. The truth was out, and it could not be put back in the box. The legal battle that followed was not the swift, dramatic trial some had expected, but a slow, grinding war of attrition. Adam Schiff, represented by a team of the most expensive defense attorneys in the country, fought every charge with a blizzard of procedural motions and legal challenges. His defense strategy was a reflection of his political one: deny everything, attack the investigators, and portray himself as the victim of a vast, right-wing conspiracy. He claimed the recordings were deep fakes, the documents were forged, and the testimony of his former aides and media allies was the product of coercion and bribery by a vengeful FBI. He was, in his own telling, a political prisoner, a martyr for the cause of resisting tyranny. But the evidence, methodically presented by the prosecution, was a mountain that could not be moved. The government's star witness was not a political rival, but Schiff's own protégé, Eric Swalwell. On the witness stand, Swalwell, having accepted a plea deal that spared him a lengthy prison sentence, recounted in excruciating detail the inner workings of the leak network. He described the secret meetings, the burner phones, the coded text messages. He explained how Schiff would identify a piece of classified intelligence not for its national security value, but for its potential as a political weapon. He told the jury how Schiff would workshop the narratives, deciding which journalist would receive which piece of the story to create a media echo chamber that would give the illusion of broad, independent confirmation. Swalwell's testimony was devastating, a confession from the heart of the conspiracy. Then came the journalists. One by one, those who had been granted immunity took the stand. They described the thrill of the exclusives, the flattery of being in the inner circle of power, and the slow, insidious process by which they had transitioned from reporters to propagandists. They presented their own notes and recordings, which corroborated Swalwell's testimony and painted a damning portrait of a press corps that had been corrupted by its own ambition and political bias. The financial records followed, an undeniable digital trail of money flowing from political committees, through shell companies, and into the bank accounts of the very people who were supposed to be holding power to account. The trial lasted for 6 weeks. In the end, the jury, a cross-section of ordinary American citizens, took less than 5 hours to reach a verdict. On a cold Tuesday in December, Adam Schiff stood as the jury foreman read the decision. On count 1, violation of the Espionage Act, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. A gasp went through the courtroom. On count 2, conspiracy to defraud the United States, guilty. On count 3, obstruction of justice, guilty. The word echoed through the chamber 27 times. Schiff was found guilty on all counts. His face, which had maintained a mask of defiant arrogance throughout the trial, finally crumbled. He swayed on his feet, his lawyers having to steady him. The man who had judged so many was now a convicted felon. At his sentencing, the judge was unsparing. "Mr. Schiff," he said, his voice ringing with contempt, "you did not just break the law. You betrayed the very essence of your oath. You wielded the awesome power of the state as a personal weapon. And in doing so, you inflicted a wound on this nation's trust that may take generations to heal. You have shown no remorse, only a bottomless arrogance. You are the very definition of a threat to democracy." The sentence was severe: 40 years in a federal prison, with no possibility of parole. Epilogue: years passed. The political storms of the Schiff era faded into the annals of history, a cautionary tale taught in political science classes. Adam Schiff, now a frail, gray-haired man in a prison jumpsuit, became a forgotten footnote. His appeals were exhausted, his fortune was depleted by legal fees, and his family never reconciled with him. He spent his days in the prison library, writing a rambling, self-pitying memoir that no publisher would touch. He was a ghost, haunted by the memory of the power he had abused and the legacy he had squandered. Kash Patel never sought the spotlight. After his tenure as FBI director, he quietly retired from public life, refusing all offers for book deals and television commentary. He had not been driven by a desire for fame or political gain, but by a simple, unshakable belief in the rule of law. He had seen a great injustice and had worked, with quiet determination, to set it right. His legacy was not in the headlines, but in the restored integrity of the institutions he had served. The nation, too, had begun to heal. The Schiff affair had been a national trauma, a moment that forced a painful reckoning with the decay in its political and media institutions. The reforms that followed were slow and imperfect, but they were real. A new generation of leaders and journalists emerged, forged in the fires of that crisis, with a renewed commitment to the idea that truth was not a partisan commodity, but the bedrock of a free society. The swamp had not been drained entirely, it never could be, but a powerful blow had been struck for the principle that no one is above the law. The story of Adam Schiff's downfall became a stark and enduring reminder that power is fleeting, that lies have a price, and that in the end, accountability comes for everyone. If you found this story of justice and consequence compelling, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next, because the fight for truth is far from over.